pretty relaxed compared.
Yeah.
You should be published here momentarily. I'm just hitting publish.
Awesome, thank you, man.
For sure. Yeah, you're going.
Sweet.
Were we talking about Nova today?
Yes, we are. On Facebook, update, so I can get the link. And then in about a month, I leave to work at NYCC,
What?
New York City Comic Con.
Nice.
That one's fun too. That is a 4-day show, not including day 0.
Yeah.
And last year I walked about over 40 miles working that show. For RTX this year, I walked a total of 40 hours working the show.
Wow, that's a lot of walking.
Oh yeah. I lost about 6 pounds working that show. Which is probably a combination of
Stress and
not so much stress. This year is actually less stressful than last year. Last year was pretty stressful. This year was less stressful, but it's a combination of not as many calories as I would normally consume, and then a lot of more walking than I would normally do.
yeah.
Also more alcohol, but if you do a shit ton of exercise, it doesn't matter how much you drink. So
You said 40 miles over 4 days or something?
yeah.
That's still a lot.
Yeah.
I think I did like 8 miles in Vegas and twice and dying both times. I'm just like, the next day I'm like, and I'm done.
Yeah, I usually hate myself. Like my body hates itself afterwards, but I'm now just so used to it that it's like, all right, time for the abuse. Do it.
Hello there.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
Awesome. Yep. Why is this
Yes.
taking so long? I see you, red light. Show on Facebook, so the link can go.
Oh, you're sharing it on Facebook?
Well, they live stream to a Facebook Austin Tech Live page. So I'm waiting for said page to update, show the video so I can get the link and tweet it. But it's taking its time.
These guys here.
Pizza.
Yay, pizza.
Tables are full, buddy.
We'll do it up front then.
Did you bring the cups this morning?
No.
Didn't do that.
I have a bag of some, I
I
think,
think
plates. I don't know about
we
those.
probably have enough in our office. I'll run those in.
Okay. And I can give you some time because I'm trying to get the live stream video before. You still have to log into our Twitter account?
Somewhere.
Let me.
Did you email it to me?
I can't remember. Let me text it to you. Can you watch the Facebook page, Austin Tech Live, and wait for it to sooner or later show our video so you can tweet out the link?
Say what now?
I'll just text it to you. I'll text you all the details.
Close.
fix the login for a Twitter account, because it was for Laravel Austin, because it was apparently compromised with that Twitter page, so.
So you're gonna text me a link to the postal watcher?
I'm gonna text you the, username and password for the Twitter account. And then I'm also gonna follow up with a text of the Facebook, with a link to the Facebook page.
I'll be right back to complete the postal notes.
Sorry, that plate. Saturday down. I mean, the tables look pretty clean, right?
Yeah, it's close enough. No, it's not like yesterday.
Oh, nice.
What? How do you go here to brownies? I agree. So if you don't,
I mean,
if you
I
don't care
have
about having a
pennies,
plate,
just-
we have pizza. If you would like to wait for a plate, they're coming. As well as cups, so you can actually drink the liter of soda.
Oh, yeah. That'll work.
Might be helpful.
Awesome. One of you guys always bring up pizza.
Oh yeah.
None of these are for you.
Hmm?
None of these are for you.
No, I never asked Eric to get me one.
Wait, aren't you gluten intolerant?
Celiacs.
I think we had that discussion.
It's a
Wait,
lot of
that's-
fun.
Is that cheese?
It's gluten. I can't have anything gluten. I won't die, but I will feel like death.
That's the OG gluten-free people before it was a fad.
Yeah. But I kind of have to give some thanks to the fat people because they actually gave people with true celiac, actual issues with it, options. Otherwise, it was just like, I'll have a salad, I'll have another salad. Oh, look, that salad was somehow still not safe. Great. Let me back. All right, well, someday hopefully the video link will show. If not, you just watch it after it's done. But I'm going to go ahead and kick things off. Actually, no. Nah, I'll wait because the plates are going to show up. Everyone's going to rush for pizza. So I'll wait for the plates and the pizza rush. And the brownie rush.
So have you been playing around with Nova already? Have you been playing around with Nova?
Sorta, kinda. I've been digging through the documentation a lot. I have nothing at work or personal that would really benefit from Nova. I might actually have something that could use Nova, but it's like a for fun bullshit project, so I'm not sure if I actually want to like activate it. Though I think I've already paid the $90 to get a license in case I do. If we have enough time to get to a live demo of setting it up today. So, might actually find a use for it, or force a use case for it.
I was already looking at throwing it into my project. Because I was about to use the other one that's been around a while.
Yeah, that one package for dashboarding.
It's like a sailor's admin panel.
I've seen that one a lot, and I'm sure this package kind of just completely bones that guy.
Voyager?
I think it is Voyager.
Yeah.
I think that one's pretty good too, from what I've heard. Yeah, I feel like everybody's gonna jump on Nova though.
Yeah, I think.
I was told not to use Voyager because Nova's coming.
Yeah. So I bought it, started setting up. We're looking at moving our admin panel to Nova, and so I started setting up, some of our models and kind of getting it all working on there. And it's it's kind of neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna, I think we're not doing it all right now, but we're gonna kind of step by step kind of move all of our admin panel stuff to Nova. Yeah.
I have like 6 plates for my office, that's not enough, but that's all they, we can go back to the capital factory, I guess.
We can,
pizza box
or if
tops,
you
you
want
can turn
to
it
try
into
and
pizza.
like, yeah, I have a box knife, I can cut off the pieces off, the box tops.
I mean, I just grabbed a fair copy of the dog, actually.
Well, we can cut us.
Okay.
I think it's perfect.
Alright, sorry guys, I usually bring my plate bag.
Where you go, Hunter?
Well, usually what happens is I bring my plate back, but then I don't need to because usually whenever Eric gets the pizza, Domino's also brings like a bag of plates and napkins. So I'm like, well, I bought my stuff for no reason. So I was like, well, it's gonna happen again, so I'm just gonna leave my stuff in my car. I mean, I'm pretty much staring almost right at my car right now, where my plates and everything are. So.
Do you know we get cups, or should I go see if I get some from the restaurant?
I think Eric's gonna bother, like Eric's Calendar Factory, beg them for some.
Okay, cool.
And I think more or less Slade seems to like us, so. But there are a few more plates up here if you'd like some pizza, and also some pizza tops that we are very elegantly ripping off or cutting off right now.
What do you do with Laravel?
I'm the Bob's guy since
So we got some makeshift plates.
The best guy.
Exactly.
Really?
I knew this part was gonna come in handy one day.
Yep. Yep.
What's
It's achieved its purpose.
Go to reviewpush.com. That's our product.
Okay.
Would you like a makeshift plate?
We're a .com.
Alright, you got a real plate.
I stole one. Like an Austin .com.
Hey, we got some more plates and cups, so we don't need the makeshift stuff anymore. Unfortunately, now taking home extra pizza is going to be a pain in the ass.
No, wait. Our new motto is we make businesses
Extra
better.
pizza.
We need to update our website to the new
Perfect.
motto. We just had like an all hands
I
meeting.
usually bring my, like I was explaining, like I usually bring my bag of plates and stuff, but every time I do, whenever y'all sponsor, Domino's always brings the bag of plates and stuff. Yeah, like the past few times we've already had plates and stuff, so I was like, oh, I'm not gonna bring my bag this time.
That's not.
You like integrated
Just
it
put
all
it
different sites?
Yeah.
Eh,
Yeah.
Awesome.
Which is actually way harder than it sounds.
Yeah.
I'll try to
nah.
use my sponsorship money to get some stash of them in my office for you.
So you're
Not the worst idea, actually.
Yeah.
What am I doing?
So sent you the login, I sent you the link to the Facebook page,
Yeah.
and theoretically, sooner or later, our live stream will show up on that page.
The redirect.
If you could just get the link and tweet it, that'd be awesome.
Send me a Twitter.
Yeah, I texted it too.
I registered it. It's available.
Yeah, I still haven't figured out the Docker, but everyone talks about it.
That's what I do.
I didn't get that.
Weird. You can get the Facebook page link? Okay, so I guess the fantastic percent was too long. So here, and you get that text, that giant text, if you scroll a bit, is the password.
All that, yeah. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff I do. That's like that.
Sorry.
Close the door and go back.
Because when people are just like, oh, like describe your job. Like, what do you like do? Like, how do I describe it?
Yeah, it's hard to put it in language.
So it's lines that just say like, oh yeah, I work with computers. And they're forever. It's like, well,
That's pretty rough.
Maybe not really, but kind of. There are cups like this there. There's even plates now. So that's you need to get like one pizza with like veggies, like mushroom, pepper, olive. You got like the meat and the other meat and the plate. No, mushroom, pizza.
I think they have in the past.
Sorry, last question. Should it show up on the Facebook thing or should it show up on austintechlab.com?
It's supposed,
Both in theory, but in practice, not much.
it's supposed to be on Facebook, but it's taking forever to show up. So I don't know if it's like
Wait, if I go to austin.com, just forward me back to Facebook.
Okay. So technically, yes. It's supposed to show up on the page, but for some reason it's not. Ideally, it'll show up sooner or later. I mean, the red light's on, so if it's not live streaming, then it's for sure recording. So,
I'm in the Twitter. I logged into Twitter, so.
sweet. I'll email you whenever the password gets changed eventually to deal with the whole Twitter password breach. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get things started. A little bit of a late start, but we should be able to get through everything. So, welcome to the Laravel Austin meetup for the month of September. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Review Push, for providing the, as always, amazing pizza and soda and brownies that smell delicious. So, thank you, Review Push. Thank you, Eric. Some quick housekeeping calendar updates. We've got the Austin PHP meetup next Thursday, September 13th. And for the topic, I usually refer to Ian at this moment, but thankfully we've got one of the organizers of the meetup here. So take it away, Logan. What's next week?
We're talking Go for PHP developers. So how Go is different, how you can think about building applications in Go and where it might fit into an existing PHP application environment. So really interested talk. Guy spent a PHP developer, spent the last 6 months or so kind of like heads down in Go. So he's got a good perspective of both languages, and it'll be really good.
Nice. Who's giving that talk?
Greg Robertson. Yep.
Is he the one that did the same talk at Longhorn PHP?
No.
Okay, because we had the same, we had literally the same title of presentation, Go for PHP developers,
Yeah.
and Longhorn PHP, so I was wondering if it's the same person.
Yep.
Awesome. Go's pretty great. Recommend checking that out. It's awesome. And it makes Logan happy to have people show up, so you should do that. Our next Laravel Austin meetup is going to be next month, October 4th. When we get closer, I'll be tweeting out all the details to make sure, and putting on a meetup and emailing and all the things to make sure y'all are aware of what's going on. But next month is going to be a bit different due to some startup games or some startup whatever Capital Factory is doing. We unfortunately do not have the Capital Factory available to us. So instead, it'll be hosted at the company I work for, one of our sponsors, Modernize. It's just right up here on 8th and Congress, so not too much further away. You can basically just park here still and walk over there. To make things even more interesting, will also not be here. I'll be out of town in New York. So Eric, our lovely co-organizer, will be, yeah, lovely, every time. We'll be leading the meetup and everything. So once we have more details and information on how to handle that, bit of a mix-up, but we'll get through it, I promise. It's gonna be okay. Modernize is lovely. We'll make sure that information's spread out correctly. So, we've got Cascadia PHP, September 14th to 15th, which if my brain calendar is correct, is like roughly next week-ish or so. Yeah, next week. I'm gonna check it out. I forgot to update the website. Oops, but thankfully the website, since it used to be Pacific Northwest PHP, this website actually redirects to Cascadia's page. So it works out. Good job, unintentional mistake, Hunter. And then we have ZenCon October 15th to the 17th. It's in Las Vegas. So if you like Vegas, and I'm assuming you like PHP because you're here, I mean, it makes sense to do both. You can do both things at once. It's great. I mean, I'd just go just to see the Linux group again to Luxor, but that's just me. So that is all the fun, fancy housekeeping stuff. Get out of your system preferences.
I don't think it's Facebook would be important. The last post on Austin Tech Live is July 26th. They have to have other stuff between that and now.
Yeah. Okay. I'll ask Slade what's going on. And, oh, cool.
I think mobile Facebook kind of like does its own thing.
Yeah.
Maybe
Sorry. Oh, cool.
Especially if you're
Because
an
I got
organizer.
the touch bar max now, and I just now noticed that DexSet has the slide previews in the little touch bar, so I can tap on them. That's really cool. Okay. Enough about that. Where's my mouse? Hit play. Hey, that worked first time. Awesome. So This month's presentation is about Laravel Nova. If you have a Twitter account and have been watching Twitter or follow the Laravel News website, you've probably been berated with a barrage of Laravel Nova related news. I'm here to berate you even more with Laravel Nova, but kind of just going through what it is, the various features of it, and if we have time at the end of the presentation, even walking through just setting it up on a new Laravel installation. So, what is Laravel Nova? It is a beautifully designed administration panel for Laravel, straight from the website, and it's honestly not lying. All the stuff I've been looking into so far, it looks great, it functions like pretty well. It's nice to just have something out of the box. It is powered by code-driven configuration. Sorry, noticing my slide notes aren't showing up. But the entirety, like, all of Laravel Nova is configured using simple PHP. There's 0 configuration stored in your database. So you just write in the language you're used to writing in, and you get an amazing configuration panel. You don't have to muck around with database tables and all that stuff. There's a lot of tables that power what WordPress does. You basically get a WordPress style admin without any of that extra mess. It's pretty great. One of the key concepts of Laravel Nova are resources. Resources are Nova's representation of your element models. When you're setting up Laravel Nova, and it's, yes?
Are you going to do the Taylor thing and not announce till the very end of the presentation that it costs money?
No. Yeah, that's actually a good point. It does cost money. I forgot to mention that. It is $90 per site for a personal license, and I forget the not for personal license cost.
$200.
For the not personal one?
Right, yeah, it's $90 for the basic, like single, pretty much everybody.
Yeah.
And then $200 if the site makes more than $25,000 a year or something like that is how they're upselling you.
Yes. So, it costs money. That's a good point. Forgot to mention that. So,
Is that a one-time fee or is that a yearly or?
one time.
Per site.
Per site.
Per site.
And also per Nova version, I think, is how that's going to work.
It has the same model as Spark, so like the release cycle for the license I bought is called Orion because it's all space-based, of course it is. But I think for any release that's part of the the Orion release cycle is free, included with my license. Whenever a new version, basically, major version comes out, it'll be some sort of either a whole new license or an upgrade license for theoretically cheaper, something like that. But at the moment, there's just the one version 1.0, so not 100% sure how that's going to play out. I'm assuming based on Spark, it'll be the same thing.
Like a couple years until the next one.
Yeah. So, yeah, as I was saying, resources represent and Nova resources are basically the representation of your eloquent models within your application. To create a resource, so you don't have to write it from scratch, you use the rsn command Nova resource and give it a name. In this case, if you've got a post eloquent model, you probably just want to name it a post Nova resource. There are 2 properties within a resource class. The model property, which basically just tells Nova which eloquent model this resource represents, and then the ID field, just telling it what the field is for the ID. Resource classes are automatically registered, so the second you generate one, you don't need to do anything else. They just automatically will start showing up in your dashboard. But if you want to or need to manually register them, you can. This is what the dashboard Nova will look like once you have all your resources set up. So you can see in this example, we've got comments, licenses, posts, roles, users, and videos. Here's the users resource page. Obviously, some of the names we're used to seeing in Laravel. Once registered, it'll just show up automatically in the sidebar so you can interact with and do whatever it is you need to do through set administration panel. Resources support eager loading, so if you have a lot of fields or resource titles or subtitles that rely on related models of data for representation, you can eager load them, just defining this property on your resource and giving an array of the eloquent relations that are defined in the model. So in this case, this would be like a post resource, and you probably always want to show like the author of the post for some reason, so you can just define that every time you load the post resource, eager load the user with that resource, and that all proxies down to the eloquent model, et cetera, et cetera. Resource events. So since Nova basically just uses your eloquent models that you already have defined, all the usual like eloquent methods you're used to, like create, update, delete, force delete, things like that, all the same eloquent events are being fired. So if you already have event listeners for like the various eloquent events tied in, they just work automatically with any of the changes Nova makes. But if you'd like to tie in events that only happen when Nova does stuff to your eloquent model, you just need to wrap the, if you're using an observer class, just wrap the user observe call with Nova serving in whatever service provider you want to put this in. And this way, Laravel actually built it intelligently know, all right, the request that triggered this thing that happened to the eloquent model came from a Nova call. I'm going to go ahead and attach this observer class, which will handle these events for the eloquent model in question. So resource classes are made up of fields. It's how you represent the data that you're seeing in the admin panel. To define fields, you just, whenever you generate one, you'll get this public function fields method that returns an array, and you provide it with a multitude of various field objects. An example of some of the ones that are built in are ID and text, and you can obviously sort them. It's the chained off sortable method. You'll see that for text, like text name, Nova will behind the scenes snake case whatever you pass into make, so that basically if you've got a column that's just lowercase name, you provide a name, it will snake case name to coincide with the correct eloquent property on your model. If you'd like to show or hide fields, I just realized I added something I needed to add to this presentation. So I'm going to get a real quick through these. If you'd like to show or hide fields, you have a variety of methods available to you. You can hide fields from the index representation of your resource, from the details, so like specific resources detail pages. Hide them whenever you're creating or updating your resource, and also specify them kind of just like in the universe. Only viewable in the index page, only viewable in the details, only on the create and update fields, or except on those create and update forms. So you have a lot of options whenever you add all these fields to your resource. Obviously, for some certain heavy resources, you might have way too many fields. It's going to look ugly and cluttered. Nova supports the concept of field panels, so you can group fields together. So this, obviously, like this protected function is not built in or required, but it's just a way to organize your fields. So up here, you've got your typical fields. This light is not dimming, that's annoying. But you've got an ID that's sortable, and then you just pass in a new panel. You can give it a title of the panel, and then the fields that are part of the panel. Down here, it's the same one. You've got a place field, a text field with access line 2, a country field, and obviously all these are hidden from the index page. So on the detailed for like, per resource page, you'll be able to see these fields on the panel. Excuse me. So, field types. There's a lot of them. I've only included a few. If you'd like to know more, I would honestly refer you to the documentation because there is a ton of them. But there's support for an avatar type field. You've got code, so you can actually view like code blocks. country, which will give you a, it'll show like the text of the country, but if you're on a create or update for the resource, it'll give you a select drop-down of all the countries from one of Agolia's APIs, by public APIs. There's the gravatar field, so it supports pulling in gravatars for things. A field for rendering and editing Markdown. A place field that will tie into another one of Agolia's public free APIs and kind of help you like auto-populate place information. There's a status field type that will actually like kind of give you a pretty like one of those like almost like dot colored line bar things depending on the status. Like you might have a status column that's like 1, 2, 3. You can actually like turn that into something better represented than just 1, 2, 3. And then a tricks field. Tricks, you may have not seen it. Their Basecamp developed this fancy WYSIWYG editor called Tricks. So if you've got a field that's probably text in your database, you can turn it into a tricks field so that whoever's like creating or updating a resource will have a nice WYSIWYG editor to write the content for it. So say if you're making like a blog application, your body for a post would be probably a tricks editor just so you can get the fancy like formatting and things like that. Nova supports computed fields as well. So if in your database you represent names as first name, last name separated, but you really only care to show the name of a user as both first and last together, instead of splitting the two, you can actually create a computed field, just combining them. Obviously, when it's computed, name will just be how it labels it in the UI, and then the closure provided as a second parameter will actually provide the data. As you can see, we're just doing this first name, this last name. Nova resource classes are smart enough to basically magic method any like property accessors to the underlying eloquent model it represents. Excuse me. One thing to note though, that since the computed fields are not tied to a database column, like directly, they will not be searchable. So if you need to be able to search users by first and last name, you'll probably want to include those fields still, and then just have a name field as well. Maybe only use that for index viewing. And then the world's your oyster. But if you need to be able to search by the like user's name, you'll probably want to separate the two if they're two separate columns.
Is it still sortable though?
The like
The name of a computed field?
No, computer fields are not sortable.
Not sortable.
Not sortable? No. So if you need to sort by, or sorry, sortable, yes, searchable.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
I believe it's sortable actually. The documentation didn't specify it's not, so I'm assuming it is. It specifically called out that they're not searchable though. So I'm not 100% sure on that one. I want to say yes, they are sortable, but not searchable. Nova supports all the relationships that come out of the box with Laravel itself. So adding a relationship is basically the same process as adding a field. They're just these fancy like has one, et cetera, based on a relationship name. And you just add them to that same fields function array that we saw earlier. You give it does the same thing, we'll snake case it, so, or I guess depending on this one, probably camel case, but it will be smart enough to where if you have an address relationship on your eloquent model and you title like has one make capital A address, it'll convert that to the correct like relational field / method on your underlying eloquent model. Belongs to has some special logic. Whenever you have a belongs to field on a resource, whenever you go to create or update, you'll actually get a fancy drop-down menu that will use the belonging to models like title. So basically, if you have a post tied to a user, it'll actually give you a select box of the users that are available in your application to say that the post belongs to, which is pretty nice. Belongs to minis are also special. If you have if you have a belongs to menu and you have extra fields on your pivot tables, for example, you can actually add fields for the pivot tables of relationship to display on the index. So if you've got a roles pivot table that has an extra column for notes about the rule, you can actually show that data whenever you add the belongs to many relationship field. You can chain off a fields method to return an array of fields for that resource. And you can also do the same for actions. We'll get to actions a bit later, but it belongs to many supports both on your pivot tables. Morph 2 obviously is a bit of an interesting case in general, but Nova supports it. You can, obviously in your relationship, like if you've got either post or videos, you can morph to that's commentable. If you give it chain off types and give it basically the class definitions for the commentable related entities, so post or videos, it will properly, whenever you go to create a content resource, it will properly show the create page with a drop down of, do you want to create a comment for a post or do you want to create a comment for a video? Things like that. Searchable relations. So some relationships make sense that just show a drop-down menu, but if you've got a ton of users, for example, having a drop-down of all the user, like first and last names, is going to be awful. Like 1,000 users in a drop-down menu is just going to suck to utilize. So you can actually specify a relationship as searchable, which will switch it to one of those drop-down menus that you can type and actually search for the users that you want associated for.
What does that do internally though? How does it implement the searchability of the field internally? Does it so it's data in a database ultimately, right?
Yeah.
So it's not really a search service behind that.
We're about to get to that, but by default it will do basically your fuzzy searching against the database, using the model against the database table. But there are some other options on top of that. We'll get to that now. So obviously, since Nova supports being able to create or update resources, much in your general application use, you probably have input validations for these things. Unless you like to live dangerously, you'll want to apply the same validation logic to your admin panel. Nova supports that. These are a few examples of how you can add rules. In this case, you can either just do the same, the regular string syntax for this name is required, has a max length of 255, or you can use Laravel's new validation rule object concept that it introduced recently and just give it a new valid state rule object. Or if you get really deep into it, you can pass it a closure that takes in the attribute, a value, and a fail closure if the validation fails, so that you can do some checking and pass in what the failure message will be for the validation rule. If you need to change up rules based off of whether it's the creation screen or the update screen, you can actually specify rules that only apply for when you're creating a user. For example, you really only care, for example, you may care that when you're creating that you can only have one user with the same email. And update rules, not the best example, but you can basically specify rules that are only valid when you're updating a resource. If necessary for a validation rule, you can drop in this placeholder, basically kind of blade syntax of resource ID, and Nova is smart enough to get the related model's ID and replace it with that resource ID. So you can use that for different validation rules. An example I've always seen on Laravel's docs are doing a unique check but excluding the ID of the model in question, things like that. Authorization. So, I forgot to move that text. Oops. Oh, I forgot to move such entirely. Crap. Okay.
Is this like the group participation where we talk amongst ourselves about
No, this is the section where Hunter somehow scrolled to the entire file and just skipped this section and went on to the next one. Nova supports Laravel's built-in authorization, basically. So you can do like the basic like closure-based checking of things, or you can actually create policy objects and all the stuff like that. I apologize, I messed up. I skipped other slides. But don't worry, there's a lot more content. But they go into a lot of detail about the authorization of Nova in general with like requests. Basically, you can if I remember correctly, you can restrict which users can interact with certain resources. So for example, you can control users being able to view resources but not create and update them, or view them, update them, not create them, things like that.
You can even hide certain fields from certain groups of users.
Exactly. Speaking of searching, so tied in with the fields being searchable, all Nova resources are globally searchable with a fancy global search input field on the top right of your Nova interface. If you would like to, all resources by default are viewable at search, but if you'd like to exclude a resource from that search, you just update this globally searchable field to be false on your resource class. If you are utilizing Laravel Scout, instead of using the default approach of fuzzy searching your resources database columns, it will automatically check to see if there's the Laravel Scout searchable trait on the output model and just use Scout instead. So in that case, it will be utilizing Algolia and things like that. So obviously, the Algolia searching approach will be a little bit more efficient than fuzzy searching in a database table, but that's also depending on how much data you have, etc. But it does support it. Filters. So filters basically allow you to scope your Nova index queries. So for example, if you're looking at a user resource and you want to be able to quickly show, like, just show me all the users that are admin users, you would implement that using a filter in resource. To create a new filter, you just use the artisan command, Nova filter, type our name, in this example, user type. An example of this filter that got a lot smaller than I expected it to. There's two key functions at play here. There's the apply function that basically just takes in the request, the query, and the value passed in for the query. So in this case, for a user type, you would just have return query where type equals to whatever value is passed in. For the UI, there's this public function options here that also takes in a request in case you need to do some authorization logic for what options are available to the user. But in this example, by default, we have administrator and editor. The keys are what you'll see in the human readable UI case. The values are the actual values that would be used in the query against the database. So you choose administrator, it'll actually do where type is equal to admin, editor, editor.
So this page is made when you do the artisan
Yeah, when you do the artisan command, it will pre-pop the class with this apply function and this options function.
Okay, and that's why the request is in there, even though the particular block doesn't need it. It's
Yeah.
in case you do need it.
Yeah, it just stubs it out for you, so that's all there to go. And those are, filters are basically what you want to do for your basic filtering of your resources. Lenses, on the other hand, are similar but slightly different from filters. They allow you to really dig in and fully customize the query used to show your resources. So an example of a lens would be wanting to basically show all of your application's users sorted by total lifetime revenue. Creating that list might involve having to join a few of the tables and run some aggregation queries on columns and things like that. A bit more complex than just a simple where. That's where lenses kick in. So whenever you generate a lens class, you'll get pre-popped with two functions. First one is query. which is passes in a lens request object, and then the Eloquent Builder query object. And then there's a few options with request of like with ordering, with filters, just so you can, basically it handles the sorting and filtering on top of the lens object. But then after that, you just have a query object. Selecting your fields, your user's ID, the user's name. Here's our aggregation of the licenses, tables, price column as revenue, and we're joining licenses, ordering by, and grouping by to get exactly the view we want to see in Nova. The other methods on the class are fields. So this is how we actually document which fields are viewable when you're utilizing this lens. So ID, name, and then you've got this number type of revenue, telling you exactly what it maps to for the out of the results, since there's not an actual column named revenue, and then a closure for some extra formatting. Obviously, since we're showing off revenue, we want to add the $sign plus some number formatting logic to clamp things down. And then if you want to go the extra mile, any filters you've already defined, you can also attach to this lens object, and they just work out of the logs. So you can have filters for your basic stuff, you can have lenses for your more advanced stuff, and if those filters also apply for a lens, you can have both and get really granular with your admin panels. And it's awesome. So lenses are not automatically registered because they're tied to resources. So whenever you create a resource class, one of the functions you'll get is a public function lenses that just returns by default empty array. But if you create a lens, in this example, which is made most viable users, we're going to attach the lens to our user resource here. Excuse me. If you need to authorize your lenses, hence why this request object is brought in, you can use the function can_see, takes in a closure, that receives a request object, and then in here, since we're utilizing all of Laravel's built-in authorization logic, you can just use the authorizable trait that's built into the user object. So you can actually just utilize a request, get the current user, can view valuable users, and then get it in the resource, the Eloquent model, just so you can check like, hey, can this user actually view this? Excuse me. Actions. So we touched on this earlier, but actions basically allow you to perform more custom tasks in Eloquent models. Say, for example, you want to be able to email users their account data that is requested. You can define that as a custom action within Nova. You can generate an action class using the arson command. There's a recurring theme, a lot of arson commands built in. Nova action, give it a name. In this example, email account profile. And then once an action is attached to the resource, you can initiate it from either the index screens in Nova or the detail screens.
So this probably said that was implied, but so these artisan commands, they generate code? Is that what they do?
Yes.
Okay. That's what I thought.
Generates a bunch of
I just
code.
wanted to verify that. So it's like they're not used for, they're used for generating boilerplate basically.
Yeah, it's basically the same thing as all the artisan made commands, just prefixed with Nova. So this is an example of an action field, kind of shortened down a bit, but this is our email account profile example with a ton of use statements I probably should have removed. But the main function that we care about here is handle, which takes in action fields, parameter, I'll explain that in a moment, and then a collection of the models that are being affected by the action. This method will always receive a collection, even if you're only performing the action on one model. So by default, you'll probably just be for eaching or the collection methods each, whatever your poison. Even if it's one, you'll need to loop over it. But in this case, we're just looping over the models in question, user models, and just kicking off a new account data. Excuse me. object and calling the send method on it. So basically just a mailable built into Laravel. But you can do literally anything you want to your models in these actions. There's no limit at all with these. So then action fields I mentioned. On the action class, if you specify an array of fields, the formatting got a little bit screwed up, oops. These will actually prompt as input fields before your action is executed. So if you click on, say, email account data, and you have this subject field, it'll bring up a modal asking for the input of, like, in this example, what's the subject of this email going to be? And then whenever you complete that, hit submit, you'll be able to, in this method, just do, direction, so you got to spell it. In this method, action fields, you'll be able to just do fields subject, the like snake's case version of the title you gave the field, and utilize that in your handle. And now getting to what I spoiler alert. Yeah.
Sorry. Does it always result in a modal popping up? I'm trying to wrap my head around.
Yeah, it'll always pop up as a modal. Action responses. So by default, Nova will just automatically give a generic success message when an action is executed, but you're free to customize it any way you choose using a variety of methods on the action class. So some of the supported responses are message, danger, redirect, and download. Message will be your generic success, it worked, or some other better response. Danger will be if the action failed, for example. Redirect, if you'd like to just send them to a new page after the action's performed successfully. Or download if, say, you're like, one of your actions is generating some expense report or something, I don't know, business stuff. Once the action actually generates the file, you can give it a download response, so you actually will be able to download the file generated, so you can then do whatever with it. Action support, being able to be queued. Sometimes some of the actions to be able to be perform are slow or take a lot of time or really don't need to happen synchronously. You can queue them easily by just having your action implement the should queue interface, and that's it. Obviously, you can add these. You'll want to have serialized models, bring in queuable, and then interaction with queue if you need to do some more fine-tuned interaction with the queue connection, like checking number of retries if it fails for some reason, things like that. One thing to note is if your action involves a file upload field, Nova does not support queuing those actions right now. It just can't queue file uploads attached to it, so those will have to happen synchronously. But technically, there's nothing stopping you from having a synchronous action that dispatches an event with the file that is queued, so there's obviously some ways you can work around it.
Or run through the file real quick and queue each line of the file.
Exactly. In a lot of cases, you'll probably want to have a log of actions performed on your resources, so basically an audit log of sorts. Nova has this functionality built in, basically. So if you go to your underlying open models and add the actionable trait along with all the other traits you might have attached to your model, Nova will just automatically start tracking any actions performed on the model in a separate table and all that. Excuse me. And you'll be able to view those actions within the Nova interface. Since we mentioned queue actions earlier, you'll probably want to actually know the status of those queued actions and be able to update them correctly. So if you've got an action that's queued, for example, you can actually mark the action status as finished or failed or whatever may be the case within the action class, so that whenever you go look at the action log, you'll be able to see. Basically, it'll be your easiest way to be able to see, oh, hey, that queued thing I did finished finally. Things like And if I remember correctly, that action log interface shows that same like dot image thing I was talking about, like the status of where the thing is, instead of just like a number or something, not super user friendly. So actions are not registered automatically since they're tied to resources. So yet another function that's pre-popped through the stub on your resource classes is the actions function. It takes in a request object in case you need to do some authorization and things like that, or based on request data actions, whatever you need to do using request data. It returns an array using your returning an array of your action objects, much like everything else we've seen so far. You can authorize actions for a resource, but you can actually get a little bit more fine-tuned. So sometimes you want to be able, you might have actions that a user can see but not run, or actions that they can run, and ideally if they can run it, they can see it, obviously. So you can actually make that determination whenever you're adding actions to a resource. So obviously in this one, we're just saying you can always see the action, but you need to have this, the user has to have this email account profile permission to actually do the action. You can attack actions to pivot tables or resources. We kind of touched on this earlier, but same thing as adding fields to a pivot action. You just chain off an actions method call, returning the action you need to give it, and that'll just operate directly on the pivot table records and not the whatever records it's associated with on either side. Metrics. So Nova also gives you the ability to gain insight on key business indicators through three different built-in metric types of either value, trend, or partition. All those classes are created using the following methods. Value metrics are useful for just showing like a single value and optionally a change compared to a previous time interval. So in this example here, 89 users with a 8.54% increase from the previous 30 days. A value metric will look something like this. There's two main functions of these classes. There's calculate, which just passes in the request and has a few built-in functions. There's more than just count. There's count, average, sum, min, and max. And there's a few functions built in that give you, if your use case for the single value doesn't fall in one of those buckets, there are methods provided to specify directly what that single value is, as well as the change over time. But then you've got this ranges function here. And this is the one weird place with Nova. In a previous example, when I showed the ranges, I believe it was for the filters, for filters, the key was the human readable value, and the value was what got passed into the query. Metrics are different for whatever reason, and the keys of the array from ranges is the value passed into the query, and the value of the array is the human readable format. So this just allows you to specify, like for your value, 30 days, 60 days, 365, or month to date, quarter to date, and year to date. So one thing to note, the MTD, QTD, YTD values are kind of like built-in little shortcuts. So if you want to show these values of month, quarter, and year to date, you have to use MTD, QTD, YTD. I can't imagine why you'd use something else. This seems to be like the standard across business speak land of how you represent these, but if for some reason you need to change them, you'll have to do some custom stuff. These are the built-in helpers for you. Then we've got trend metrics, aka our handy-dandy line graph to show trends per day. Supports ranges as always. This one, this metric supports your more than just the count. There's the count by, average by, sum by, min by, and max by. We'll kind of know structure these metrics. And also supports the metrics of minutes, hours, days, weeks, and months. And that's really all I've got for trends. And then finally, the last type of metric is the partition metric, aka your pie graph. In this example, you're showing a pie graph of the users per billing plan. So non-daily, monthly, or yearly billing plans, as well as a built-in total representation. And in this example, the main function, as always, is calculate, giving it a request, the user, and the column to group by. If you want to change up the labels from whatever the built-in is, you can just pass in this label closure that receives the value and then do whatever you want to do. In this case, if the value is null, we're defaulting the label to none. Otherwise, it's just uppercase the first letter of the value for Stripe plan. And like all the other metrics, count, average, sum, min, max, or built-in methods for manually providing your partitions, etc.
Hunter, do you know on the trends one, can you throw in X and Y scale and labels and whatnot?
I don't think so. I didn't see anything documentation-wise for it. And I haven't had a chance to dig into everything code-wise with Nova. Some of the metrics you may want to show are potentially going to be like slow or expensive to calculate, and in those cases you'll probably want to cache the value so you're not waiting forever for the metrics to show up. By default, any metrics you generate will have this cache for function, and you just return some form of basically how many minutes the metrics are cached for. In this case, we're using just the now add 5 minutes or add minutes 5 to return that value, which kicks back either date time or date interval. This helper is a carbon instance, which is all the same. Some way, somehow calculate how many minutes your metrics are cached for, and Nova will just handle it out of the box using whatever cache driver you've already configured. Registering metrics, much like everything else, if it's not a resource, it's not registered automatically. For metrics, they're typically tied to resources. So once again, yet another method that's auto-stubbed onto your resource class called cards, which is where you'll register all of your metrics. In this example, we've got users per day, podcast count, and then just for ease, I just do fit users per day. But there's a lot of different options you can specify. By default, metrics are shown on the index page for a resource. But if you only want to show a resource on the detail page, you can specify that using the only on detail method. By default, metrics have a width of 1/3 of a Nova content column. But if you want to change that, have certain metrics bigger than others, you can chain off the width method and give it a 2/3 or full measurement to take up an entire column, or 2/3 of the column, etc. If you're going to adjust a metric to be only on the detail page, so viewed resource specific, you'll want to update your metrics like calculation to, in this example, count the resource. The podcast where user ID is like the resource ID you're viewing. So basically in this case, you've got a user resource you're viewing, and only on the detail page you want to see how many podcasts they're subscribed to. You'd update your query to count based on that.
So, in this case, there are no view files for Nova. It's all in the resource.
Yeah, it's just all built in. Yeah, Nova's got a bunch of basically all the HTML. I think it's using Vue for things in the back end and all. It's just all built in. You just write the PHP code and it does the rest for you. I think the only time you'll have to using Nova, the only time you'll actually have to write like front-endy type code is if you're building a custom theme Nova. Like, maybe not theme. Nova does now support themes as of a very recent, like minor version, but it's not like, it's almost as themeable as Slack is. Like it's more of just the sidebar theme than the actual like main content page. Obviously, since Nova is just a download file that's on resources and everything, you could just muck with the front end like elements yourself, and you'll just have to juggle the upgrading Nova version process yourself.
It seems pretty extensible with Composer plugins and stuff. Right on the Composer plugin that provides view components
Yeah.
that you register in with Nova, and then now there's a whole different trend type or whatever.
Nova seems to be pretty extensible, which for all the things it does out of the box with like barely basically just running PHP, it's actually quite impressive. No wonder Taylor's been working on it for so long. Obviously, you'll have some metrics that apply to your application as a whole and not for a resource specifically, aka like your dashboard metrics. If you have metrics, in this case like a new user's metric, you want to show on the dashboard, your home page when you first load into Nova, you will go to your Nova service provider, update this, or I can't remember if this is there, update this protected function card method that just returns the array of what your dashboard metric should be, and they'll auto show up. Obviously, much like everything else in Nova, metrics support authorization as well. So whenever you're registering your metrics, either in your dashboard or per user, you can chain this can't see method, takes in a closure. Same thing we've already seen before, supports policy objects. Anything Laravel's built-in authorization has, Nova supports. And that's Nova. All the things of Nova. So do we have any questions? Yes.
So if you're building a package and a Laravel package, and you want to build some components in Nova, is there a tie-in like in service provider or app provider or some provider thing to say, for all the Nova stuff, or if, for the Nova specific stuff for that package, go look in the package folder /Nova or whatever, instead of, it looks like it's being stored in app Nova.
Yeah, so how do you install Nova by default? It's a bit interesting. Installing Nova is basically you have your base Laravel installation, you download a zip file from the Nova website, and then you extract it somewhere in your project. Typically it'll be app. Or it doesn't have to be app Nova.
It's in the root.
Yeah, it's in the root directory, then you update your composer config to tell it to look for that, and then it just loads everything in. I did not do a ton of research into like the customization of Nova, which involves those types of things, but I believe bring it down. Mouse over here. There's a lot of customization options, so you can build a lot of tools for it, which track price trackers, and I think in your case, if you're building a Laravel package and maybe it has cards built in, you would. I guess as here. We'll generate a card using the command, the card you pass the command should follow the composer vendor package format, and then registering it would be tied to your resource. So you could probably with your package have Nova resources bundled with your package, configured, and then manually register them within your base application through the Nova service provider. I guess.
Yeah, I'm looking at one of the Nova plugins, and it says that you do a composer require, and then in your Nova service provider, there's a method called tools, and then it returns an array, and you just put like the service provider for the package in that array.
Okay, so like if somebody wanted to use the package, they just have to go into their Nova folder and add it as like a
Like Composer require like the
package.
and I would just put it in your standard vendor, and then in your you open up your app, like app/provider/Nova service provider has a method in it for tools, and you can put their service provider from the package, the class, you know, in your array.
Okay, so just updating an array basically after the require. Okay. Yeah. So,
Easy enough.
so forgive my like naivety here, naivety.
Naivete?
Yeah. Is this like a CMS but like a library or?
You can treat it that way if you choose to. It's obviously not going to be a like super like fully featured CMS you'd expect with some of the CMSs already built off of Laravel, like Laravel October, I think it's called.
October CMS.
Or October CMS, which is built off of Laravel, or like your WordPress admin, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just need a basic CMS interface, then yes, you could utilize this in that manner.
It seems like the selling point of this is that it's a pretty drop-in for a Laravel application you've already written. Like you already wrote the front-end public-facing thing in Laravel, and you just kind of include this after that, and it still works. And it reads a lot of your Laravel files, like in your app directory, so it just kind of like it automatically uses, for instance, model validation. And so if you have like model validation, it kind of reads that out of your models and everything like that.
Yeah.
So it kind of interacts really well with an existing Laravel application. It's really just drop-in.
All right.
You don't have to, unlike some of the like CMS or admin systems that are based on Laravel, you don't have to start with it. You can add it into your project later.
Right.
I have a question. So I was working on getting Voyager plugged in, trying it out, and came to the problem. If you have a repository, you're trying to work in your local and then bring it into a project and push it to live, migrations didn't work. Because Voyager doesn't have a way to do migrations. They haven't figured that out yet. But I don't know, does Laravel have a way for you to work with multiple developers in the same project and push changes like that?
Yeah, so this doesn't have any effect on your database. Like Nova doesn't store any information in your database, and it doesn't have its own migrations. It doesn't mess with your database at all.
It creates one actions table.
Yeah, it creates the action log table.
Okay.
Well, it has some shred stuff going on.
It will use this already built in like credentials and authentication. So you're more than likely your application already has the concept, like your local app already has the concept of logging in for a user. It just piggybacks off of that for logging into the Nova dashboard.
So to answer your question, on migrations, you're just using standard Laravel migrations to migrate your data as you go in your application.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just Nova doesn't have any migrations you need to run with it. Like if you're never going to use the action log, you never need to worry about Nova's migrations. Though the second you do a Nova install, it's gonna publish the migrations for the action log table anyway. So sooner or later you're gonna get that table, whether or not you use it, or whatever.
I guess the problem I was running into is with Voyager you can create new tables and things, but that would only exist on your application you're working on that machine. So there's not a way to throw it in.
Yeah. Nova
With this,
thankfully
you're going to
dodges
use the
that.
Laravel tools to create a new model and a new migration and create the table in the Laravel way, with artisan commands and migrations. And then you're just going to say Nova, what was the
Nova resource.
Nova resource, and then the same thing that you did whatever you named it, and then it'll create a resource in Nova for you to manage that same that same one. So there is no like database creation tool in Nova.
Yeah. You just use the tables that are already made for your app.
I had no
it just
problem
works on
with
top of it.
Yeah, you can't play with others. It's,
Well, how do you develop locally and then push to production with Voyager? I don't understand at all. It doesn't make any sense.
I think Voyager is a pretty good package, but that alone is pretty hard to around.
Yeah.
It didn't make any sense.
So what about Horizon and, or just kind of the idea of, going back to the packages idea, it's like developing Nova specific things like Horizon that you can distribute to other people that would require Nova. Like, there's not like service discovery, or it's like, hey, go down, composer require. I guess you have to basically do a Laravel package at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what you're saying is like developing Nova things that require other packages like Horizon, things like that. Yeah, I mean, you'll have to go the same route that Nova's taking and how it checks for the existence of, say, like, hey, does that Scout searchable trait exist? If so, use the Scout integration for searching resources instead. And that, like, Nova just doesn't really, like, there's a built-in helper method in Laravel for, like, does a class have a trait? And it just checks off the, like, literal trait class name string. So you basically have to do things like, you'd have to do things like that. Like, if your package requires it, add your composer file a suggest for the package so that the developer knows, like, hey, this package, like, it'll pop up as a suggest. But
some of it's Nova, but not all of it.
Yeah, like if you need Horizon for your Nova card you developed, or Nova tool, whatever, then you would, in the suggest, be like, hey, this package suggests you install Horizon, but since you can give it custom like text of why it suggests, you would basically say like, hey, you need to install this. And then whenever your card goes to do its PHP logic, you just do a simple like, does this Horizon class exist? If not, throw an exception, which will break everything, and the developer will then be like, oh yeah, I forgot to install Horizon, and then they install it. Okay. That's the best we can do on that case. You could probably do, like, if you know a service binding that Horizon puts in the service container, you could always do, like, in your service provider, like, if this app bound, give it the alias or the class name.
Yeah.
Or if not this app bound, then obviously Horizon's not been, like, loaded in or installed. Throw the exception. That one gets a little bit trickier because you have to deal with, like, ordering service providers and when they're loaded, but you have some options in that case.
Okay.
Unfortunately, no fancy built-in way of checking that.
Distributing Nova packages or something like, there's no like module or plugin system or something like that.
Someone's already building it.
Yeah.
There's a website of like Nova
I
packages.
think it's novapackages.com.
And then they built a package for Nova that lets you search Nova packages and install Nova packages from inside Nova.
Okay. Because that's one of it. This is exactly.
Okay, so someone just built this one. If you haven't heard, there's a tool called PHP Stand, which does, I actually can't describe it.
Why is it called that? Why is it called that?
Laristan?
Yeah.
The tool is called PHP
Why
Stand.
is that tool called that?
I have no idea.
I can't understand.
Yeah, no idea. But it does. So since PHP is not a compiled language, like Java and things like that, you don't have the benefits of compiled languages that will actually do like type integrity checks and things like that out of the box. So like if you try to compile Java, giving a method that expects an integer, a string, the compiler will explode. You're like, no, that's not valid. We don't have that in PHP, obviously. So PHP Stand and by proxy Laristan, which is the Laravel wrapper on top of it, gives you that level of affordance. It basically will do a static analysis of your PHP code and find places in your code where where you're giving a method that expects an integer, a string, for example, before you actually run the code. And that comes in play, especially if you're doing like the new PHP 7 type hints, but you don't have the strict type check enforced. Stan can kind of pick up the slack there and tell you, like, hey, you're doing this. And it'll also do a lot of other things. Like you'll check dot block comments and support some things that PHP and IDEs don't really support at the moment, like union typing and things like that. It's a cool tool. Someday I'm actually going to probably do a presentation on it. But for now, not yet. But if you would like to be able to, for whatever reason, have Nova run Larastan, then you can. I don't know why you would do this. You typically will be using Larastan as part of your like local development CI workflow to just make sure the code you've written or code other developers have written is correct in a variety of ways.
So we're assuming all these things would live somewhere in the Nova folder?
Right. Yeah. Like here's a better example made by one of the developers that works on Laravel a lot. A cashier manager. So in this example, I'll read the description. Add some components to your level to help you with managing customer subscriptions. It works hand in hand with Laravel Cashier. So it adds a section in the middle where resource details you some information about the subscriptions, obviously what cashier subscription the user subscribed to.
This is seeming more and more like a CDN. Like the more like you go into its like feature.
Or a CMS.
A CMS, yeah.
Yeah. It like you definitely can turn it into one. It's a very basic like backhouse admin panel with some CMS functionality.
But like this adds like blatant CMS functionality.
Yeah, it's designed in a way that you can turn it into that, if you choose to. But this Nova package, for example, adds all fancy like cashier stuff. So if we check out the install, it gives you what you need to do. You can copy paste this composer require and go, or you can download the zip, or go straight to the GitHub. I have my mouse. Yeah. I did a quick install. I can run this, and we'll just have all of the Nova cashier stuff we need to tie it into our things. If we were developing a cashier app, for example, and we'll see how fast the Wi-Fi is. Pretty good. Thanks, Google Fiber. We are probably not going to have time to go through a live demo of setting up Nova, unfortunately. There was a lot of content involved, and I don't think we'll be able to touch all the parts of it in like 30 minutes and leave room for questions and thinking and all that. But I've already done the work to install Nova, which was basically downloading the latest release zip file from the website after you've purchased a license. And then you can kind of see here, I moved the extracted file to just a folder called Nova within my installation.
I have another question actually. From my understanding, it's Taylor that's like one of like the big developers on this.
Yeah.
So does that? I mean, of course, as everyone knows, Taylor's the maintainer of Laravel too. So does that mean that like Nova is like gonna make him some money? I'd imagine. So does that mean that like the sort of development of Laravel will start to be like kind of driven by Nova? Like, oh, like I want to add like a Nova feature, let me like add the feature to Laravel so I can add like a different feature to Nova kind of thing. Because I've seen that sort of thing happen sometimes when you have like an open source project, like a money making project that like depends on it. So
I mean, it's definitely possible. Like we already have a tool called like Spark, which is a paid license thing that you use to basically build out like an application that has product tiers and subscriptions and all that. And I've not seen anything that very blatantly looks like a new Laravel feature because of Spark.
well,
I'm sure it's
Taylor maintains Spark though.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, Taylor
okay.
maintains like any of the Laravel like official projects are Taylor that make money. So Spark has not nothing has been blatantly added to Laravel to support Spark. I'm sure by just pure like coincidence or happenstance that Taylor's been like, I wish I could do this thing in Spark, for example, more easily. When I got to do that, oh yeah, add this thing to Laravel that just also happened to make things easier for like general application usage. Will that happen with Nova? Maybe. I'm not sure. Like, since Nova's more related with like managing the resources of your application and your output models, if anything comes out of Nova that turns into a Laravel feature in a new version, it'll just be easier like integration with output models, either like new model functions or relationships, things like that. I use the fancy bat instead of cat to use the line numbers, but then the damn lights wash it out anyway. But after you download and put that Nova folder in your root directory, you have to update your composer file to give it a repository type path, the URL being the actual file path to where that Nova folder is, and then you just update your require statement to add Laravel Nova star, so it just pulls whatever versions in that folder. It doesn't really matter. Basically, it's kind of like a local path composer package that you download and install, and then after that, you just PHP Nova install basically just does the same thing as vendor publish, just is helped out, so you don't have to do fancy path logic. But running Nova install actually dumped the following files. The other window, full screen view. Where's my mouse? Is boop, washed out the hell. Thank you, lights. That's why I like the other room, because I can actually dim the lights. The main thing to point out here. Thank you, PHP Storm, for your awesome render bugs. In providers, we now have a Nova service provider, which has auto registers your routes. You've got a gate, so basically this is how you determine who can actually view Nova in your application. And then you've got your cards, which gives you a help card to show on your dashboard by default. You'll probably remove that at some point in time. Any tools you add, either custom developed or installed via a package. Register, and then there's obviously the other methods I mentioned, like cards that you add to the service provider to show like dashboard metrics. And then obviously it dumped this app Nova folder, which comes with a built-in user resource relating to our user model. The title, aka this title property is what defines what you'll see in those like drop-down boxes on belongs to, for example, or when you're searching for things. You can give it. This actually wasn't mentioned in documentation, but it's a typical Laravel way of not having things that are documented. But you can actually define a static variable of columns that are searchable as default. And then in this example of resource, you've got your ID, you've got your gravatar, you've got a text for name, text for email, you've got a create and update, validation rules, a password field, which will basically just give you a password input box. And as we can see, we obviously don't want to show the password on index and detail pages, so we'll only show the password field on create and update forms for resources. And then you have your base resource class, which just has a bunch of stuff. These are some of the methods you can override to customize a lot of things. For example, this method will allow us to use the customize the index query for a resource. So by default, it's just going to show all the resources, like all your element models tied to the resource on the index page. But if you, for some reason, want to filter that out, for example, you don't really care about seeing, by default, your soft deleted users, for example, you can override this index query and customize that. Same thing with Laravel Scout. You can actually customize the query Scout uses to search your resources. Detail query, same thing. And then relatable query. I have a feeling like detail query and relatable query you probably won't be interacting with much, you'll just leave the base, but if you need to get more fine-tuned and customized, you can. And then, yeah, I published a few other things like resources. Resources, Fiddler, Nova, partials, just got a few blades for like the user page, basically just use logged in. By default, it will, looks like it will render the avatar if it was logged in using Gravatar. Basically just D5 in your email address, showing your name, some logout stuff, and then a logo. So you can customize it. In this case, it's using a SVG to show Nova's fancy default logo, and then I think there's a few other things that published. Yeah, Nova's got its own language files, so you can customize and localize all of your Nova interfaces. So if you've got international users of your dashboard, you can actually support their native languages. And yeah, that's all the things with Nova. I was kind of hoping to show a demo of it before I then realized, oh yeah, Nova has a lot of stuff to go over. So unfortunately, I was unable to. That I didn't have an easy for funsy app I have to just tie in Nova that actually made sense.
Oh, so you don't have like a demo to like show the interface and like looking around, or is there like one on their website maybe?
They, in their documentation, will show off previews of what the interface looks like, but I personally, at work, we don't, like we have our own admin panel already that's been around for like years, that the company's been around, and we don't use Eloquent for our API, so Nova won't work for us.
And you didn't make like a personal one either, 'cause
I have two personal projects that it could tie into. One would probably be the best candidate, but I don't need it for that project, but I'm probably going to tie this in since I've already paid for the license, just for funsies. The other project has eloquent models, but they all tie to an SQLite file that I don't control that database. And all of those tables are literally just an ID and a JSON column with a metric ton of JSON. So not the most, I could probably use Nova to make it work and like compute the fields out of the JSON to render things, but not necessary. No, now at this point, I kind of want to see if I can compute it. Obviously, the interface won't be that helpful because I won't be able to search any of the damn fields I put on the resource, but I can look at it.
that seems it's where pick that.
Yeah, it is. I mean, this app is very much just for posting. It's literally, its entire existence is technically cron job pulling down a manifest file, the SQLite file, putting it in the right folder, and then every Tuesday and Friday running a command to post stuff in a Slack channel based off that SQLite file. So it doesn't really need a Nova interface. Could I put one on it? Sure. Am I going to? I already bought the license, so I might as well.
I'm kind of curious though, like what Slack channel and like what info. It doesn't seem like it's particularly sensitive, so.
No, it's actually not PHP Austin. It is, I'm sure it's not anything like super secret or proprietary. That's my work chat though, this one. This is a personal Slack group. Where's that message?
Yeah, I can't even read what the text says.
I'm not even sure if I can zoom in with Slack, but I'll give it a try. This post here. No, but, oh, I can't zoom in. Cool. Yeah, so all that work is just to post this video game content.
Is that so?
Well, this is a
this is
Slack
Destiny.
channel. Yeah, this is a Slack channel posting stuff about Destiny 2.
Yeah. Okay.
So all that work is just to download a SQLite file so I can dump this information every week.
Nice.
Yep.
Alright.
I have a lot of free time on my hands, and this is how I put it to use when I'm not playing the game. So,
Wait, which game?
Destiny 2,
Never played it.
it's a lot of fun. Just
Free
came
game?
out with new content. No, not free game.
Mm.
First person shooter, PC.
I think it's
Xbox.
free on PS4 this month.
Oh yeah, it might actually be for this month. I wasn't sure if it was the weekend.
Not Forsaken, but.
Yeah, not Forsaken, but the base game is free.
With all those extensions.
Oh, it does have the expansions too?
I think so.
Warm Mind Crystal. Oh, cool. So if you're interested in playing it and you have a PlayStation, it's free this month.
I don't. I can't have a PlayStation. I need to actually get work done.
Yeah, that's the problem I have. I already own the stuff, and getting work done is.
You just have to destroy it, like Office Space. That's the only way out, man.
I spent too much money on those things. To destroy Office Space.
That's like time to reverse Office Space.
I know, but you have to kill it before it kills you, man.
Yeah, I'll be fine. I'll live. But
No, it is fun.
it is fun. I will put my slides on Speaker Deck, post my meetup group so you can go through them. Doing something a little bit different. I'm sure the notes that I use to make sure I'm on track are riddled with typos and poor grammar. But I will upload the presentation with the notes attached this time so you can actually have more information besides just the brief details I give per slide. And this, whenever we figure out where the hell the link is, I'll share wherever the video recording went. Yeah, I'll have to ask Slade. Figure out where that went, share that via Twitter. It'll be in the Slack channel as well, primarily because our tweets go into the Slack channel, so perfect. One less thing I have to post in one place. And then, not an if, but when I get around to tying Nova into this thing, completely overkill, but fuck it, why not? When I get that done, I will, in some form, post like a brief video, just digging through things and clicking around, or
we could do Awesome PHP in 2019.
yeah. And by then we'll have a bunch of new Nova features to talk about.
Is SQLite always a JSON file?
No, so SQLite is its own file format. So Bungie does something interesting in they have a REST API, which is what initially kicks this off. But how they do it for their mobile apps, and I think the website too, is their REST APIs are very lean. They just return JSON with a bunch of like hashes that relate to items, and then they just use those hashes to look up the data in the SQLite manifest file and then show it on the UI. So like if I load up the Destiny 2 companion app on my phone, it's making a REST call or two, send my authentication to get profile character specific data, and then all the data to actually show in the app is pulled from an SQLite file that just downloads periodically on my phone.
Oh, okay.
So because of that, they have some APIs that give some detail, but to get the full amount of detail that I wanted to show in this thing, I had to go the same route of architecting a way to keep the manifest file up to date, and then dropping some models on top of it that represent the tables in the manifest file, which are just an ID and JSON column, and then actually showing information. I've shown this before, but I can again. Oh, you went to this room for some reason. So,
One of those databases that I've always liked the idea of, but never had a reason to use it, SQLite.
SQLite's great if you want to have unit tests, or I'm not going to get into the debate of a unit test talking to the database, potentially blurring the line of it being a unit test versus whatever. But if you want to have a database but actually spinning up an entire MySQL database, then you can just use an SQLite file for your testing rig and accomplish roughly the same thing. But this is completely off the track for Nova, but this is literally the only API call I make for getting milestones, and then the rest of it is digging into the models, using a custom scoped query, because Bungie, for some reason, decided to have their IDs signed. So the hashes they show are unsigned positive hashes, but the hashes in the manifest file are signed negative or positive values. So to just make my life easier, I just scoped the query to find it, and either if it's positive or negative, and then it's just building out a bunch of crap and then transforming based on a milestone to show the fancy stuff you see in Slack. Yep. And this code is all open source, so if you ever want to check it out and see how I'm interfacing with Slack's APIs and a Laravel app, you're more than welcome to. It is not the cleanest code, but it works for a for fun video game project, so thumbs up.
So why would you use Discord for video game stuff?
Because the group I was in was using Facebook Messenger, and then one of the guys was like, I'm deleting my Facebook, I want to keep talking to y'all. And before I could chime in, somebody else made the decision to use Slack. But also looking into it, Discord, like writing custom Discord integrations is actually a colossal pain in the ass.
You have to write like a Node.js server.
Yeah.
It has a constant connection to Discord.
Yep.
Well, but there you could use a bunch of bots that you don't really have to have running yourself.
Yeah, it depends on what you're trying to do. No bots exist for Discord for the thing that we wanted. Like, there's more that I tied into the Slack than just this one. I have like 2. Like, this actually contains like 3 different bots that talk to Slack. This particular Slack workspace. One part of it doesn't work anymore, which is fine because no one uses that piece, which is why I didn't try to fix it when it broke eventually. But I emulated Facebook Messenger's like group message functionality of creating plans that people could RSVP to in the group message, and it would send alerts. I emulated that logic in Slack using, ignore this man, using the same thing of basically being able to trigger a command and giving it times and doing time zone conversions since we're across the country, and posting messages and queuing off events that would fire into Slack to actually send reminder messages of like, alright.
Where does this code sit then?
Just on a Forge DigitalOcean server.
Oh, then it's the same thing, right?
Yeah, it's the same thing as hosting, it's just, you don't have to have a constant connection to Discord. With like Discord stuff, I think you have to have like a node server that's just running like a constant, like, almost like a socket type connection to it.
Yeah, you can do it both ways. You have like a channel where you have just like an API push, and that triggers it, but it's not like a real user. It's not like a real bot.
That's cool. When I dug into it, I could not find word for shit documentation to do one because I was actually using Discord for something else, so I just gave up. I'm sure I just missed it somehow, but
Slack has a lot sort of more polished integrations in general.
yeah, I mean Discord definitely helps with the like if we were doing voice things, but since we're all Xbox gamers, we just chat through Xbox's voice chat system, so we don't need things in Discord.
Dude, Discord just announced free like screen sharing too.
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
do that.
It's awesome. Pretty cool.
Another good thing though, you log in with one user and you're in all of your channels or like your servers.
Yeah, I do
Instead
like
of
how
logging
Discord has the
individually.
one. Yeah, I do like that Discord did the one user, multiple workspaces or servers concept. I wish Slack would do that. I wish Slack would either somehow do the same thing or allow you to make one Slack account that you just tie all the workspace accounts to, and then you're just one login, you're done. You just go, all right, I want to actually have this workspace on my whatever client, and I'll do it.
Yeah.
We've obviously sidebarred drastically, so thanks everybody for coming out for the Nova stuff. If you want to stick around and talk about Slack and Discord or anything else, thank you. We do have 4 brownies and 2 slices of sausage pizza up here, so if you'd like to take some home, please do. I have the remains of the boxes to like semi put back together if you want to transport it.
Pizza box.
Free games now. Also, we got liters of soda, so feel free to take those home.
Got 1.5 pieces.
Yeah, we now have 1.5 pieces of pizza.
You get
some more cheese left
too.
too, I don't know.
Yes, I want to ask you about a couple of slides, but that's not Nova stuff. On those computer side.
I'm excited to try it out. I'm gonna try out Nova
There.
soon.
Okay, cool. So,
Let's see.
my question about this line here. I see that these are all views up here. What is really using them?
So this brings in like using for the namespace side, and then this is
Can you
the
share?
syntax for using traits on a class.
Okay.
So this one basically just imports the
That's what I don't like,
namespace,
though, is, like,
so you don't have to have this
you
whole
can't have, like, a
namespace
driver
here, and
or
then this
like
one
you
just
buy
is the
it.
syntax for adding traits to a class.
Okay.
That's risky.
Trades, I see.
Yeah, and traits are basically just runtime
It's
copy
also, the
paste.
thing that annoys me about it is like, I want to.
Okay. And do you mind if I scroll through? There's another one
X
that I.
projects, actually like tiny little.
There was the
sites that
not
I've
equal
been-
to symbol that you used. This one.
The lights, like
Is-
the licensing is.
Oh,
Or is that character?
oh,
Or is that just part of the font?
Like, I don't
yeah,
have
that's the
to-
font. I'm using a font that supports ligatures,
So,
so
Right.
it's detecting that I'm gonna not, like,
Yeah.
not equal to, and just ligaturing
Okay.
it to a
Hopefully
special
they-
symbol.
That's what I figured.
Change.
I honestly
Model.
forgot that
Yeah,
Dexet
sure.
supports rendering that,
It
so
don't make sense.
I
Like,
call traits mixing.
if you don't use this.
they basically
for
are.
some
It's funny because
thing,
Laravel has its own concepts of
Take it.
mixins for objects.
I paid $20 per set.
Yeah, Laravel's-
It's not
alright.
$20 per set.
I'm gonna look into it, man.
What is the difference?
Smart guys, man.
Laravel's got a lot of
Is
awesome stuff too.
It only does
SaaS
e-commerce.
product.
Go on, Eric.
Well, it's
Pretty good, man. How about you?
It's like an out-of-the-box
Pretty
SaaS
well,
product.
pretty well.
It's what you build your SaaS
I didn't
product
realize you were here.
so that you
I'm
avoid
here.
having to do
Are you
all
gonna be at
the
the
work
PHP
that
meetup?
every SaaS
Couple
product
weeks.
has to do.
Alright, next week today. I'm not sure.
We'll do billing for
Depends on my
sites,
schedule.
for your
I hear the guy gave us a
subscription-based everything, so that
I'm looking forward to learning about Go and
Is it
PHP. so.
you? Is it you? Are you the one doing it?
Yeah, I'm the one doing it.
Nice.
And so it gives you all the
I
user,
get- I
all the,
get notes
everything
on
you need to run a
how you
SaaS
get
product
it.
except what your SaaS
Oh,
actually
I'm-
is.
You're ready
Yeah.
for here.
Thank you.
So it's a big-
I appreciate it.
I just-
So
You can ask Eric, I've been doing it a lot.
Yeah, I remember, man.
So,
Right, so you're the
That is
one-
subscription model.
I think you're really good at algorithms too, man.
It's out of the box.
I was talking to
Rated for
Cliff,
subscription
some
model.
guy.
Cliff Parenti?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think we were, yeah, I remember he was telling like, yeah,
He's
I
like,
heard.
dude, you know who did all this
That's a
stuff?
whole time.
I was like, yeah, well, you know,
As well.
to mine it's just not a surprise, man. Like,
Yeah.
I kind of figured it was.
Okay, because Cliff actually was like, oh yeah, by the way, I like interviewed for a friend of mine for your meetup. I was like, oh, do you remember the name? And I told him like, oh yeah, I know.
I
remember
Yeah,
that.
I know a bunch of Go algorithms, so I was like,
That's
well, it's not PHP,
$100.
but
Here's what I got to work with.
trying my
Or
best.
take his and build the front.
Yeah, I've actually, funnily enough, I've been playing around with Go and Gin.
I'm sure you're emailing about next month, I'll be here for next month's meetup,
Yeah,
or across the street.
I'll nail down all the details.
Okay.
I want to work things out so that running things in modernizes is simple.
Well, if you want to invite me over there so I can see the space before the meetup, when you're still in town. then-
Yeah, okay. If you like want to, we do happy hours at our office like every other Friday. So if you want to come over and have a free drink and check out the space next Friday, you're more than welcome
Let
to.
me know, I'll be in the office.
I'll text you the details.
All right, I'll see you guys.
Have a good one.
You also have cheese.
Oh, you? Oh, I didn't realize we still have any cheese left over. So please take it home. I can eat it. So,
You don't have a dog?
No,
Cat?
no. Allergic.
Cat's gonna eat cheese here too.
The lenses versus filters, is a lens just basically a more advanced filter?
Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Filters are just for your basic, like one column type query things.
Right.
Lenses are when you need to, like, you want to show more like in-depth data, when you need to do like join tables and all that fun.
I wonder why they went with two different things, because it seems like a lens could do a filter as well as a lens.
I think that's why they went with two separate things. Did I?
You should look at like a super hot Instagram model right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Finally.
So,
All right.
I think the reason why they went this route is that you can have a filter, which is just your basic stuff, but then you can have a lens, and a lens can also be filtered. So you can build
Okay,
your
so
like
you
lens,
needed-
yeah.
So you needed the two different ones, I guess, okay.
Yeah, so you can basically have your lens of, like, the example I showed of your most valuable users, like basically the ones that are spending the most money with you.
Right.
And then if you want to filter that down even more, like say
that makes sense.
say you're rendering on that page, like, hey, I have my most valuable users broken down by country, and you want to filter by country, and you can, things
Yeah.
like that.
So shouldn't it be illegal to name things that are not standard plurals?
No, it should
like
be
lens
encouraged.
and lenses.
Encouraged.
Encouraged. Oh God. I'm just thinking of some of the
You
non-English
wanna go on
speakers
that?
who are going to try to who will be talking about this and.
Sorry it was so late. Thank you for hosting it.
Hey, no problem. Glad you're able to make it.
Yeah, thanks for the talk.
Absolutely.
So I've been moving into Pyro CMS, and this is similar, more powerful it seems, and
Oh, nice.
maybe the use case, but yeah, a lot of similar concepts. I kept on conflicts.
I mean, like Paul
Just like a
asks constantly,
Yeah.
you can use no CMS.
Right,
Like,
yeah.
you really can if you want to. Like,
Not its main purpose.
it's an admin panel, whether or not that means also being a CMS panel is up to your use
It
case.
certainly could be, but don't count on
Oh, this is
it.
cool.
Well, shit, I didn't even want to take this, but I know you're not going to.
I mean, if you don't want to, I can always just give it the slate.
Well, if I had it, if I wasn't on my scooter, I'd be a lot happier about it. Do you have someone to give it to?
I was just gonna give it the slate at the front desk.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
whatever.
okay.
If you wanna just dump it back in the box.
Yeah, all right.
And yeah, I actually would talk to them anyway, be like, hey, where did that video go? Because it never showed up on the Facebook page as live. Yeah, basically. Use this plate, so I'll toss that. These are all the extras, so I'll just keep it in the backpack. Scooter might, actually, no, you got a backpack.
For him too?
I
don't want to take this on my.
I'm just gonna take some of that. I can have the sodas, so I'm not gonna show that.
Well, I'll tell you what, do you prefer one or the other?
I'm fine either way.
All right, I'll take a strike then.
Actually, real quick before you take this break.
Do you want to throw these in that bag?
Those we can just set on top of the trash can.
Okay.
And
Right.
they'll handle it whenever they go to clean the room. Actually, you know what? I would just take the plates and the cups and add them to my stash and take the cups and plates that are actually done.
Yeah.
Thankfully, since Modernize is also sponsoring next week, I can just, I don't know if they have plates, but I'll deal with that. I got a month to deal with that.
What are they sponsoring next week?
So Modernize, we're sponsors the meetup next month. just
Oh,
a
next month,
notation.
sorry.
And also next month is when we can't host it here, and I won't be here. So I basically, while not being in the office or in town, I have to coordinate my workplace by hosting the meetup.